Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's fantastic to have you aboard over to our stream today. Per usual, we've got so many exciting news announcements. We have a brand new From the Ashes X-Men comic book to recap this week. Also, we have a lot of really exciting previews for the Marvel Comics coming out this upcoming Wednesday. I'm still extremely positive about the line overall right now. And I think, this past week of From the Ashes was fantastic as we finally got the flagship comic book series over from both Gail Simone and David Marquez with Uncanny X-Men. This one was just such a joy to read here. We had so many interesting just X-Men team members assembled throughout this series in like a supernaturalistic way over from Gail Simone. I thought it was thrilling opening up this series and being introduced to some of our brand new villains for this X-Men from the Ashes era too, with individuals like Dr. Ellis and Captain Ezra. Also, we had Dr. Ellis's mysterious associate Philip, and it was very interesting and harrowing watching them sort of ravage the Xavier's Manchester school here, going through all of the X-Men's disparate items. Of course, this cuts away and just opens to so many of our X-Men finally assembling together and just coming towards each other over in the series. I'm super excited to talk about the upcoming cliffhanger and some of the ramifications that are going to follow out of that series coming up in the second and third issue. Marvel Comics even released some upcoming interior pages. So, in addition to reflecting on the first issue, we'll also preview what's next for the X Men. I'm also going to talk briefly about the state of the Ultimate Universe, too. Very excited to see what the Makers Council has in store for the rest of some of our Ultimates characters. And in the brand new Ultimates issue 3 that we're going to go ahead and preview, I think it's going to be super interesting to watch heroes like Tony Stark try and face back against the Maker and some of his council. The next big launch for X-Men's From the Ashes is the upcoming XFactor series. We also have some preview pages of that comic book written by Mark Russell featuring artwork over from Bob Quinn. That book also going to be really interesting as it introduces a brand new team of X-Men From the Ashes characters towards the main stage here, especially just in response to some of the foreign powers. So it's going to be super interesting watching Mark Russell navigate through the politics of the X-Men franchise seized throughout X Factor. Without further ado here, I want to officially welcome you over to our stream today. My name is Arakko, and I am so excited about all the upcoming X-Men comic books. In addition, here we also have some brand new Ultimates titles that we're going to preview on the stream today, and we're also going to check on the latest issue of Spider-Man. Spider-Man left off in a super harrowing place as Peter Parker managed to actually exorcise some of the goblin sins along with the help of Norman Osborn, who has assisted Peter Parker in so many of his adventures throughout the comic book tale as a superhero. In fact, why don't we kick off our stream today by talking a little bit about the upcoming issue of the Amazing Spider-Man coming in from Marvel Comics. So this one is coming in over from Newsarama here. It's written by George Marston, published just 3 days ago. In Amazing Spider-Man Chapter 55, Peter Parker is going to be reunited with another character who he's going to go on a date with, as he's experienced throughout this comic book series. Chapter 55 actually reunites him with the nurse from Ravencroft, who he met very recently in an ongoing arc of The Amazing Spider-Man. Let's read a little bit more about it here in this article from George Marston. Amazing Spider-Man 55 is on the way, and it also marks the legacy-numbered Amazing Spider-Man 949. With the landmark Amazing Spider-Man 950 just around the corner, 949 is setting the stage by putting Peter Parker into one of these few situations where he's the most vulnerable, trying to get in the good graces of his date Shay Markin, who he's blown it with several times already. Frankly, I think it's so fantastic that Peter Parker is actually setting his sights towards Shay Markin. I feel like this is an individual who's a lot more altruistic and is much better than Tombstone's lawyer, who Peter Parker was previously going with. Also, I am so happy to see this series stray away from Mary Jane and finally pivot the Spider-Man franchise into just a slightly different direction. Plus, in issue 55/949, not only are readers getting some writing over from Zeb Wells, but we have artwork from Emilio Liso. These pages are so wonderful. I know Emilio Liso has contributed something towards the past of Amazing Spider-Man, but I can't wait to show you some of these upcoming pages here. Lyso's figures are just so expressive, and I feel like in each and every panel we can get a great reaction shot, not only from Peter Parker, but from his date Shay as well. Okay, so ASM 55/949 is colored by Brian Valenza, and it features letters from Joe Caramagna. In the issue, Shay completely reads Peter for filth for being late yet another date, this time because he was fighting with an all-new stilt man who manages to give him a big, ugly black eye. And here we have the interior pages that I was teasing earlier, showing just how expressive Lyso is as an artist here. I love this pose that Peter Parker is striking here on the page, and just how vivid so much of the colors are from Brian Valenza on this page too. Let's go ahead and check in on some of Peter Parker's narration here in the issue. Did you know there's a new stilt man? I do now. I caught him after going through a 10th floor chase at the Chase building. It's so interesting too. The last issue of Amazing Spider-Man actually featured an ending instead of a cliffhanger. So this comic book is actually trying to introduce some new plot threads for the upcoming Spider-Man arc too. It almost feels like a new beginning for Peter Parker, even though we're still firmly here within the Zeb Wells comic book run. Here we have a more traditional page from Lyso. I think once again this is super expressive. Some of the shading in the background showing Peter Parker scaling the building is super fascinating. I'm also liking this one-arm pose of Peter Parker in motion. I feel like once again here Lyso is just doing a great job in terms of the choreography with Peter and does a really wonderful job showing so much individual motion on the page here too. And here's a peek over at Shay Markin, who is looking much different from her usual outfit and uniform over from Ravencroft. She is definitely given a solemn look here as she's waiting for the late Peter Parker once again here on the page. It looks like she's actually surprised to see Peter when she calls out his name. She looks a little bit surprised. It looks like her expression is changing just a little bit here on the page. And she says to Peter, "Where are your shoes?" Peter responds, "I kind of stepped on it here on the way over." Once again, this page is tremendous. The panel bleed from Shay Markin and just the individual pieces of the framing, like the close-up on the eyes here, is just wonderful. On the next page, we get a much more intimate scene over with Peter and Shay, once again here. I think this page just shows how fantastic Emilio Liso is at capturing these individual scenes of expression from each individual character. We can see Peter Parker looking embarrassed and Shay looking curious on some of these pages. Looks like Shay is quick to notice Peter's black eye. Peter tries to make an excuse for it that doesn't fly well over in the comic book either. This gives way over to our credits page as well, teasing most of the usual creative team for The Amazing Spider-Man, except of course for guest artist Emilio Liso here in the issue. And also we have a John Romita Jr. cover as well on this one. I'm a big fan of the framing on this individual issue. I think it does a great job recalling the If This Be My Destiny cover over from Stan Lee as well. I'm very excited about this upcoming issue of Spider-Man. I know we only have a few more left to go before Zeb Wells is able to wrap up everything he's been doing with his run. Following this issue, it seems like we're going to get a much bigger focus on Peter's battle over with Tombstone. Tombstone and Peter Parker at this point have a super interesting relationship. In a lot of instances, they really try and battle each other, but have a hard time, engaging with fight scenes with each other within the comic book, because it seems like they drop the animosity and become friends in nearly each and every comic book issue. So we have so much interesting stuff in store for The Amazing Spider-Man. Very excited to check out the future of the series and see it transition over to the Joe Kelly comic book. We talked about this comic book a little bit in our opening here, and I don't think we've done really a fantastic job emphasizing this enough on some of our recent streams. But I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about the Ultimate series written by Dennis Camp, featuring artwork over from Juan Frigeri. I think this comic book has had such a wonderful tone and has done a fascinating job really moving the Ultimate Universe forward for Marvel Comics as a whole. It's super interesting to see some of the characters in the fallout of Ultimate Invasion fight against some of the Makers Council. This issue actually teases that the new team of Ultimates are trying to find a way to battle the Hulk over on the Makers Council. In order to do so, it looks like they plan on recruiting a She-Hulk. Couple more interesting things about the current Ultimate series. Right now, the Ultimates are getting ready for the return of the Maker. So it's pretty climactic here to watch so many of our heroes get ready to fight back against the character who really created this brand new Ultimate Universe in the first place. Also, I think so much of what Mark Millar did on the Ultimates was incredibly innovative in previous volumes, but he definitely wrote character relationships that were a little bit too violent in some instances, and featured all these like really, I don't think quite tasteful instances of like abuse with certain characters. And I've really found that Dennis Camp has done such a wonderful job so far in telling stories that have much better taste and strike really great relationships between characters like Janet and Hank Van Dyne. So very excited to talk about this new issue of the Ultimates and to see how some of our characters like Thor are trying to recruit She-Hulk here to battle the Makers Council. This is the third issue of the Ultimates. Let's check out the solicit here from Adventures in Poor Taste. Introducing the She-Hulk. The Ultimates search for a means of destroying the Maker's most powerful pawn, the Hulk. And in the process, they uncover an army of Hulks hidden away from around the world with She-Hulk at the helm. The Ultimates logo featuring this star here and kind of teasing the whole team, I think, is so fantastic. In addition to Camp and Frigeri, we have colors from Federico Blee, letters from VC's Travis Lanham, and design from Jay Bowen. I really grew attached to so much of what Juan Frigeri was doing over on Invincible Iron Man. I think this series really captures so much of Frigeri's attention to detail here. This establishing shot featuring just one panel in the upper left corner, really kind of consuming this character in gamma radiation, is so epic, as well as this like massive mushroom cloud of an explosion here. Towards this next page, Frigeri is able to show just how great he is at composing the page from these really strong facial expressions, these beautiful bleeds, and just really interesting appearances of motion that he's able to capture on each panel. I love that this comic isn't rushing towards the plot, and it's really just taking its time to establish so much of the background of the Marvel Universe, especially towards what's going on here with the Ultimate characters. It looks like some of the gamma radiation is actually spilling into the rest of the characters on this island, and we might even be witnessing the origin of the new She-Hulk character. And then we're teased that that was actually a flashback sequence as we pick up with the rest of our Ultimates characters. We have Iron Lad, Sif, and Thor. So much of this Ultimates cast features characters who are returning from previous Ultimates teams, so I really love that we have Sif, who I think just changes the direction of these characters in a really interesting way. Iron Lad says, looks like we fried something getting here, but what was it? These islands aren't supposed to have lizards much bigger than a salamander. Sif says, scientists. So I think this first preview in these first couple pages here did such a wonderful job teasing the mysterious origin of the new She-Hulk, as well as introducing some of our Ultimates heroes. plus so much of the framing and just the way these pages are laid out are so beautiful to witness. I'm so excited about the future of the Ultimates line. And even though not each and every single comic book is speaking to me as a part of the new Ultimates line, I still really love what both Ultimate X-Men and what Ultimates as a comic book have done so far here. So really excited to see where this comic book is headed next. We have one more comic book preview. This one is also super, super exciting because it's going to introduce the next From the Ashes comic book over to the Marvel Universe for the X-Men. We have the upcoming XFactor series, which brings in Alex Summers, also known as Havoc, who I recently grew so attached to as a part of the Dark Avengers series. I can't wait to see what new status quo has introduced Havoc towards this team and where Madeline Pryor is in the background of the rest of this X-Men tale. Also, Mark Russell is such a talented creator. I've read so many comics from him extending towards Flintstones, which had so much like dark satire in this really interesting prehistoric setting. I read Prez over from DC. I think that was also just a wonderful, wonderful book. I'm super interested in how some of his sense of humor is going to translate to the incredibly technical X-Men franchise. First off, I want to give a big thank you to David Brooke from Adventures in Poor Taste for posting this preview. Fame, Fortune, Mutants. From the ashes of Krakoa, a new arms race sweeps across the globe. International governments are building their own mutant armies, but only America's XFactor has the most powerful, most patriotic, most marketable heroes to stem the tide and make the world safe for democracy. Join Angel, Havoc, Frenzy, Pharaoh, and Pyro, and more as they go from one death-defying mission to another. Who will die? Who will fall in love? Who will be the first to sell out? Like, comment, and subscribe to find out. I'm familiar with some of these characters, but I really like how interesting this cast of like C-list X-Men characters are. We have Angel, who is actually a pretty important mainstay X-Men here. Havoc, who's actually been pretty integral to the line, as well as Frenzy, Feral, and Pyro. Good to see Pyro still in a comic book that's like front and center towards the X-Men's Krakoan line, or excuse me, in the X-Men's From the Ashes line, because I think he was utilized really well during Krakoa. And here's the cover, which I think also carries Mark Russell's satire in an interesting way, as Havoc is pointing right towards the audience, just like Uncle Sam, with text in the background saying, "Mutants, your country needs you. Join now." These X Factor J Bowen credits pages look incredibly nice here. I'm loving how they introduce some modern sensibilities and also implement some retro sensibilities on the page too. Once again, here we touched on the fact that this one is written by Mark Russell, featuring artwork from Bob Quinn. We have colors from Jesus Abertov, letters from VC's Joe Caramagna. Here's the opening page showing just how interesting our new team of characters are, from Frenzy, Feral, Pyro, and even this character of Cyber. I'm also really loving how much characterization Bob Quinn is able to implement towards so many of the facial expressions for our characters. I think this page also carries a beautiful sense of symmetry here too. There's some text here stating, "Let's meet your all-new X-Factor team." So in some of the following pages here, X-Factor is being introduced to the public. As you can already tell, so many of these pages carry so much of Mark Russell's satire that he's lent to so many other comic books, not only from Marvel, but for DC and other publishers like Ahoy. These characters are also talking about their public debut, and I think one of the most interesting pieces of this preview page is how Beast actually arrives out of a limousine in the very bottom left of this panel, featuring this character just bleeding right off the page here. But on the very next page, we learn that Beast isn't actually Beast. He's none other than Cameo. This, I think, really fits nicely into Marvel's current continuity because the publishers already established the fact that Beast is currently operating out of the adjectiveless X-Men series with Cyclops over in Alaska. I'm also loving how this sensibility causes some of the other, random characters to actually backlash or cause, some instances of friction towards the rest of the X-Men characters here as the rest of the bystanders start to turn towards Cameo over on the page. On the final instance, this character is trying to tell the character of Warren Angel that people love him, but he's unable to embrace that fact after being just thrown a disparate object over from the audience here. So once again, we have so many strong reaction shots over from Bob Quinn across this upcoming issue of XFactor. Tons of personality too from Mark Russell and the way that he's able to just introduce so many of these bystanders carrying some negative feeling towards the debut of these brand new XFactor characters. Really looking forward to the future of Marvel's publishing line, and I think we have a really strong start here with the upcoming XFactor series. We have one final preview to cover here, and then we will head into some brand new news involving Uncanny X-Men. Marvel Comics actually just released some interior pages over on Uncanny X-Men. In addition, we also have interior pages for the upcoming adjectiveless X-Men series. This is a preview of the second issue over from Marvel Comics, shipping this Wednesday. This comic book has really impressed me so far with just how much continuity it's carried. It's been so fascinating to witness Cyclops operating out of Alaska in the town of Merle. We also have the character of Beast, who recently got so many of his memories rebooted. Plus, there's so many interesting people working alongside Cyclops, like Quentin Quire, Kid Omega, as well as Psylocke, who's teased over on this cover. This one was published over on Adventures in Poor Taste. I'm going to read the solicit, and then we're going to check out this really interesting alien invasion-focused issue of X-Men. The X-Men fly to the rescue of a mutant crisis in San Francisco. The problem? Alien invaders seem to have a similar idea. 6 X-Men versus an invading alien fleet? Sounds about right. Plus, the conclusion of Deadpool and Wolverine weapon extraction. This brand new X-Men series, still written by Jed MacKay, featuring artwork over from Brian Stegman. In the first issue of the adjectiveless Uncanny X-Men, readers were able to learn that Cyclops' brand new factory that he's operating out of was actually an abandoned Sentinel factory. So it's going to be super interesting watching Cyclops operate out of this Sentinel factory in Merle, Alaska, with the rest of the X-Men characters. This opening page coming in from Ryan Stegman teases the alien invasion over in the issue taking place over this next page here. Loving how this brand new X-Men series is able to introduce all these credits pages in really interesting ways. All frequencies. This is Cyclops of the X-Men broadcasting from the Marauder. We are here to help, Cyclops says. This page also reminds me of the relationship dynamic that was established between Quentin Quire and Cyclops in the first issue of X-Men. Cyclops carries a ton of animosity towards Quentin, as we can see in like each and every issue. In this one, Cyclops actually refuses to call Quentin Kid Omega in the comic book. We also learned later on in the scope of the issue that some of these X-Men characters are working to help a brand new X-Men character who recently established their mutant gene in the series. Then on this next page, we actually watch Cyclops head into battle along with both Magic and Psylocke over on the page. One thing I want to quickly note about this page we're looking at is that Ryan Stegman has drawn so many previous instances of Cyclops right in the middle with characters on the left and right. Moving forward, I would really like it if Ryan Stegman was able to frame his pages with just X-Men in like different places or different instances. Because I also found that Magic and Juggernaut were positioned in very similar ways as well. So I'm really hoping that in the future of X-Men, Ryan Stegman will get a little bit more creative in terms of some of the layouts. But I really think that a lot of these character dynamics that are starting to form out of some of these X-Men series are starting to get really interesting. I'm loving how Magic is still able to evoke her more darker tendency and relationship dynamics with Cyclops. She almost taunts him, saying, "Worried about the little green men, Cyclops?" His response, "Worried? I have two wildly dangerous women with enormous swords looking out for me. When I was 13, I thought this is what heaven looked like." I do find some of Cyclops' dialogue to be a little bit too on the nose, especially in that instance that we just read. However, I do like Magic's line of dialogue and the fact that Jed MacKay is trying to introduce a ton of personality over to his X-Men run. Once again here, I just want to see both Ryan Stegman and Jed MacKay tread a little bit more carefully, and I think we could get a really solid X-Men run here moving forward. Very excited about the future of Marvel Comics' X-Men series, and to finally see characters like Psylocke and Kid Omega head into battle with the rest of this new team of characters. Okay, I think it was a ton of fun going over all those previews. We also have a ton of Marvel Comics news announcements to get into. I love reading about the future of the Ultimate comic book line. We already teased the brand new issue of the upcoming Ultimate series, but it looks like Marvel Comics actually introduced their brand new round of solicits over for the Ultimates books shipping in November. Let's go ahead and preview the brand new Ultimate Black Cat, Hulk smashing the Ultimates, and more with Marvel's Ultimate November solicits. The Maker, a deranged alternate version of Reed Richards, manipulated his way through the time stream to create a world without superheroes. But when he emerges from captivity in 16 months, he's in for a rude awakening. This is the background of the current Ultimate series that's just been so much fun to read over from Marvel. I am loving the really high concept stories that were introduced in Ultimate Invasion, and I can't wait to see them play out in the upcoming months. In his absence, superheroes, nations, and Young Mutants are reclaiming their destiny in 4 hit titles. We have Jonathan Hickman and Marco Cecchetto's Ultimate Spider-Man, Brian Hill and Stefano Caselli's Ultimate Black Panther, Peach Momoko's Ultimate X-Men. Of course, that's my personal favorites. We also have Dennis Camp and Juan Frigueri's Ultimates. Today, fans can peek ahead at what's to come in Marvel's bold new Ultimate line this November. The cover reveals and synopsises for November's issues spotlight the debut of an Ultimate Black Cat, a showdown between the Ultimates and Hulk, and more revelations behind the origin of mutants in the Ultimate Universe. And a strange new ally joining Wakanda is in its war against Khonshu's forces. So we just previewed the debut of the new Ultimate She-Hulk shipping in the future of Ultimates 3. This issue actually teases a showdown between some of our Ultimate characters and the Hulk over on the Maker's Council. Ultimates assemble to take down the Hulk. The entire roster of the Ultimates unites for the first time in this high-octane climactic conclusion of the first arc. Iron Lad has a plan to defeat the Hulk, the most powerful and imposing member of the Maker's Council. But has he gotten his team in over their heads? Afro SF, great to have you in chat here. Love all the Ultimate books. I'm starting to enjoy a fair amount of them as well. I am really loving too what Juan Frigueri has delivered to so many of the interiors on some of these issues. And I think this cover from Dyke Ruan also carries so much personality emanating from the Hulk character. It's interesting to finally preview some of these Ultimates characters striking out against the Maker's Council as well. It feels like some of the continuity for the Ultimates is finally starting to move forward here. In terms of continuity, in terms of continuity moving forward, I think Ultimate X-Men 9 does an excellent job showcasing just that, as the character of Surge looks like she's going up to battle against Maystorm. This one is both written and illustrated from Peach Momoko. Maystorm versus Surge in a static skirmish. Lightning collides as Maystorm and Surge finally confront each other. But when Surge is left weak and drained of all her power, Maystorm has even more questions, and must investigate the mysterious cult Surge is a part of and its relationships to the mutants of the Ultimate Universe. Yeah, it feels like Surge is one step ahead of the rest of our mutant characters. I can't wait to finally watch Maystorm interrogate Surge and find out some of her secrets. Also, I picked up on one of the most recent issues of Ultimate X-Men that it seemed like Maystorm has some sort, or excuse me, it seems like Surge has some sort of relationship with Sunfire, who is also a part of the Maker's Council. So I'm really interested if the cult has anything to do with the Maker's Council, and if those are some of the people who've been antagonizing our Ultimate X-Men characters for such a long time. This cover also just does a wonderful job showcasing all of the tense interactions that the character of Surge and Maystorm, I think, are feeling towards each other, even in some of the preceding issues of Ultimate X-Men as well. Here's Ultimate Spider-Man. I think one big criticism of Ultimate Spider-Man that I've carried almost across every single issue is how it's just reintroducing older elements of continuity, like dusting them off and bringing them back into the new Ultimate Universe. For me, I think this was a lot more interesting when Brian Michael Bendis was doing it towards his run of The Amazing Spider-Man over with Mark Bagley. I feel like right now, the current Amazing Spider-Man run has done a really good job using elements of continuity to push the book forward, and I'm disappointed to see Ultimate Spider-Man tread so much familiar ground. I don't see how the character of Black Cat is going to push Spider-Man towards some interesting new scenarios. Let's see if I can find anything to latch onto in the solicit of this issue. Who is the Ultimate Black Cat? Guest artist David Messina returns as tensions rise between Spider-Man and Green Goblin in the wake of recent events. A new villain steps up to the plate. What is her connection to the Black Cat on Kingpin's Sinister Six? Also, I think it's really cool that Kingpin is sort of tied into the Maker's Council as well. So Ultimate Spider-Man is also contributing to the overall meta nature of the Ultimate Universe as a whole. But as we previously mentioned, I'm just finding a hard time finding some background, some content to latch onto in terms of Ultimate Spider-Man. That being said here, I think the art team is staying strong. We don't have Marco Cicchetto on this issue, but David Messina is just a really, really wonderful creator. All right, still a little bit lukewarm on Ultimate Spider-Man, but I think I'm seeing a little bit more connective tissue in the latest issue of Ultimate Black Panther that has me a little bit more interested in that series. First off, I think seeing the brand new Storm and Killmonger Ultimate characters, super cool. Plus, we have the connection to Moon Knight here in the background of the issue. This is a really tremendous cover from Stefano Caselli. I feel like we're seeing some different composition and framing for some of these characters than we usually do with some of his artwork. The Black Panther and the Strange Doctor. A prison break goes unlikely aid to Wakanda, but is this new ally a reliable confidant? Or does the godly Moon Knight have more to offer? All right, I think Marvel is getting a little bit ahead of themselves with this next paragraph. I'm going to read it anyway. They say Marvel's Ultimate line has been a mega success, demanding multiple printings, capturing the excitement of longtime fans and providing exciting entry points for a new generation of readers. Don't miss out as they redefine Marvel's storytelling as you know it. Check out November's issues and pre order these comic books at your local shop today. Overall, here, I'm so happy that people are still seemingly invested in this new Ultimate line of series. I'm a little bit worried that as this line continues, that maybe some readers are going to drop off at a certain point. I started to remember the other day some of the twilight years of Ultimate Marvel. It felt like in some of those really late line relaunches that they didn't retain as many readers as when they first launched. So I'm really fascinated to see if Marvel is going to be able to keep up some of the fanfare behind the Ultimate Universe. I think they've done a good job so far, and I just hope that they continue to advance the really interesting meta narrative that they've been able to provide with the Maker. Marvel recently has been telling so many brand new stories with the Scarlet Witch by giving her her own ongoing series. The publisher announced a brand new plot point, a brand new story development for their ongoing Scarlet Witch comic book. Let's go ahead and explore Wanda's brand new protege called Amaranth over in Scarlet Witch issue 6. Amaranth debuts this November in Steve Orlando and Lorenzo Tometta's Scarlet Witch issue 6. This was released August 8th over on Marvel.com. This November, a young sorceress follows in the footsteps of Marvel's greatest mystical hero. Amaranth, who was created by superstar artist Jen Bartel for last year's New Champions variant cover program, will make her in-universe debut in Scarlet Witch 6. Okay, I actually didn't know where this character came from. Very similar to May Storm of Ultimate X-Men, she was first introduced as part of the New Champions variant cover program and is graduating to become a full-time character in the main Scarlet Witch book. Writer Steve Orlando and artist Lorenzo Tometa will introduce the character as a former protege of Agatha Harkness, who now seeks Wanda's help to unravel her shadowy past and control her emerging magical gifts. Amaranth is the latest new champion to have their story told in the pages of a comic, and more will continue to debut in the months ahead. I think this is a really interesting position for this character as a protege for the Scarlet Witch. The idea of Marvel using her as a bridge between Agatha Harkness with some of her previous relationship status with her developed as a protege. I think it's going to be really interesting seeing if Marvel is able to use this character as a bridge between Scarlet Witch and Agatha Harkness. Also, the Agatha All Along show is coming up very soon from Marvel's television. I think it's interesting that they're starting to expand the Scarlet Witch comic book, probably to give them some new source material for the television series. Today, fans can see Amaranth in 3 all-new Scarlet Witch 6 covers, including the main cover from Russell Dauterman that also features Agatha, a foil cover by Megan Hetrick, and a stunning piece of Yvonne Talavera, and a variant cover by Larix that will also be available as a Virgin cover. Introducing Amaranth, the Scarlet Witch takes on a mysterious new pupil at Agatha Harkness's request. But where did the young sorceress known as Amaranth come from, and what could have spooked Agatha into giving up the chance to mentor her? Ever since she debuted in Jen Bartel's gorgeous variant cover, I've been intrigued by Amaranth, Orlando shared. Who was she? What was her story? Her mystery. So, when the chance came to bring her into the Scarlet Witch and explore her questions with the rest of the creative team, I leapt. Bringing Amaranth through the last door gave us a chance to upend Wanda's dynamic with the scenario where Wanda's faced with the powerful, mysterious being she struggles to find out, an inverse of her dynamic earlier in her life. Amaranth's unique gifts hint toward an auspicious parentage and immersive power, but her life has been tinged with tragedy. There might not be one in the Marvel Universe that can help her, but if there was one, it would be the Scarlet Witch. I feel like previously we had Darcy Lewis as the point of view character for the Scarlet Witch ongoing series. I'm very happy to see Marvel shift a little bit towards Amaranth because I really find that Amaranth could bring a much darker tone to this comic book that'll help Scarlet Witch find greatness. This cover from Russell Dowderman also speaks for itself. I think it is just absolutely incredible. The framing, the composition, and some of the character poses are unlike anything I've seen from him so far. Before we stop talking about this story, I also want to show you some of the other artwork from Megan Hetrick. So I think this preview really gives us an interesting glimpse towards the rest of Amaranth's character design, especially her really interesting headpiece in the issue too. Once again, I'm really loving this design so far. I think it's a really good idea for Marvel to bring this character closer to the Scarlet Witch publishing, and I'm really hoping that maybe she'll bring a darker tone and connect the Scarlet Witch a little bit closer to Agatha Harkness moving forward, just in time for that new show to come out over in Marvel's television here. For me, this next story is going to be an absolute blast here, as there's a brand new Avengers Assemble comic book currently being published by Marvel. Let's go ahead and explore Steve Orlando's brand new ongoing series for the Avengers Assemble here. This one is coming in over from comicbook.com from Timothy Adams, published on August 8th. Avengers Assemble Steve Orlando on the return of Avengers Mansion, jackets, and more. Steve Orlando reveals details on the new Avengers Emergency Response Squad. Some familiar and classic Avengers tropes are about to make a comeback in a major way, as Earth's mightiest heroes just survived a massive vampire invasion and blood hunt, with Captain America Steve Rogers leading a makeshift team of newer and older Avengers against Baron Blood. This is the inspiration behind Avengers Assemble, a new series from writer Steve Orlando and a rotating group of artists that models the Avengers after a real-life rapid response unit. The team will be based out of the iconic Avengers Mansion and features a roster of A-listers as well as lesser-known names all working together to divert the next catastrophic event. Comicbook.com spoke to Avengers Assemble Steve Orlando about the upcoming series, where we find out why now is the time for this type of team to come together. The selection process for the team's roster, the return of Avengers Mansion, 90s era jackets, and Jarvis. Threats to watch out for, the artists working for the title, and much more. In addition, we also have some brand new interior pages over for Avengers Assemble. As you can see here, the cast making up this team is super fascinating. We have Monica Rambeau, Shang-Chi, and Janet Van Dyne as the Wasp. The Avengers brand continues to grow with the additions of the recently announced West Coast Avengers and Avengers Assemble. Why is now the right time for the Avengers Emergency Response Squad to assemble? Yeah, Marvel right now is publishing a ton of Avengers books. I'm curious to hear from Steve Orlando about what makes this comic book different from some of the rest of these titles. Orlando says, in the wake of Blood Hunt and its resolution that set up Doctor Doom as the new Sorcerer Supreme, something that's always been true is now more apparent than ever. The threats don't stop coming, and more than that, they don't want to wait in line. Blood Hunt showed Steve Rogers how much a group of impromptu Avengers could do after the main team was scattered by Verne's warriors. He's taken that to heart, and he's patterned this group after real rapid response rescue teams. Some of that may not look like a traditional superhero team. It means not every hero deploys on every mission, but it also means that they will be ready at a moment's notice, no matter when, even when some of them are already deployed. As more and more threats mount, the way the Avengers attack the problem has to change. Rogers is trying to maintain the momentum from Bloodhunt and stay ahead of the crisis curve. There appears to be a nice mix of classic and newcomer Avengers in this series. Can you walk us through how the selection process was made for the rotating cast of characters? We were in luck, Orlando said. The current Avengers roster is one of the most powerful ever, but it's a tight grip too. That left many classic Avengers open this year for a chance to reunite and return as friends. But with the mandate of always being ready, there needed to be new perspectives as well. That brought us Night Thrasher, Lightspeed, and as time goes on, it may even bring us more. The possibilities are astounding. So far, a lot of the characters made up of this Avengers Assembled team are so interesting and also bring really unique character dynamics to the book too. I think watching Captain America bounce off of like Shang-Chi and Monica Rambeau is a lot more interesting than seeing him talk to like Carol Danvers or Thor in your average Avengers comic book issue. Avengers Mansion is also back. I'm sure that really evokes a more classic feel towards this Avengers series too. Avengers Mansion has popped up here and there over the years, but now it's officially back with its doors open. What type of interpersonal relationships can fans look forward to, and who will be calling the Avengers Mansion home during your run? I feel like so much of the previous Avengers series that took place in the mansion had such a distinctive vibe, and really watching Steve Orlando try and orient his Avengers series closer to that comic book series that really embraced so much of Marvel's continuity is a really interesting way to move an Avengers series forward. Orlando says everybody on the team, with the Avengers being patterned off of how first responders work shifts and deploy, there will always be people staying at the mansion, ready to deploy. Everyone will have a room there, even if they're not all there all the time. Jarvis and Mr. Sweeney will be there too, as you'll see there are bonds of old and new awaiting. Lightspeed and Night Thrasher connecting over their shared experiences as former teen heroes from different eras. Wonder Man and She-Hulk jousting over Jen knowing when Simon's bluffing. Hercules being thrown both a disruptor and a forthright beefcake with a heart of gold. Everyone will have an opinion, and behind it all, it'll be Jarvis keeping the lights on. I'm loving the idea of Wonder Man, Night Thrasher, She-Hulk, Hercules being in a book. I feel like that evokes so much of that just really classic Avengers feel. Let's talk about the return of Avengers jackets. Whose idea was it to go for a unified look with the 90s leather jackets? Oh, I mean, I think if you've already read my work, you'll know it was mine, said Orlando. But it isn't just this nostalgia for the 90s, it needed to be more than that. When I was working on disaster relief with my friends at World Central Kitchen, I learned a lot that I didn't expect. Throughout this interview, Steve Orlando has talked again and again about like first responders and how they operate in a crisis situation, and how he's sort of positioned the Avengers characters, in that same position. So I think it's super interesting to learn that he actually has a background working at the World Central Kitchen and doing some of that disaster relief that'll hopefully inform some of the background behind Avengers Assemble. One of these things was the importance of logos and branding. In a crisis situation, it's very important that you are who you are and what you do is instantly recognizable. So these jackets will do that for our team. When they arrive from different backgrounds and eras, everyone will instantly know the Avengers are united and that they're here to help. I wish some of the pencils and artwork on this series were a little bit more fluid, but I really think so much of the composition for this foe and watching our Avengers team fight back against it is really thrilling. I'm also liking the sense of perspective as Janet shrinks into her wasp form and the enemy is having a really hard time dispatching a shrunken foe. Are these one and done stories, or will there be a storyline running throughout each issue? Orlando said both. That's the sweet spot. Comics readers deserve as much story as possible in every single issue. They demand a damn meal. But at the same time, we're telling one off stories, we'll be building the overarching threats. After all, we just said that the threats don't wait in line. So each issue will feature more and more chaos, building towards a climactic showdown. Have any of the characters surprised you to the point where you found yourself wanting to find more and more space for them? I love Steve Orlando's answer here. He singles out the character of Hercules. Hercules has been a blast from moment one, and he gets moments for sure. Everyone gets their moment, but I didn't expect to have as much fun as I did writing Hercules. Wonder Man has also been a favorite and didn't disappoint, just like She-Hulk. Of course, it's been great having Lightning on the roster. I love reading him in the back issues. He was great in No Surrender and No Road Home, and he's great now. The weekly Avengers comic books, Avengers No Surrender and Avengers No Road Home, man, those were so good. The creative team behind like all of those comic books are escaping me right now, but that was a really special time for the Avengers. This is one of the best pages I've seen so far in the series. I think the expression from Shang-Chi is super clear. I'm loving how scratchy the pencils are, but how clear, like, so much of the facial details are for Shang-Chi here too. Okay, Red Skull's daughter is the villain in the first issue. But what other threats and bad guys can you tease us with? The first thing I'll say is that Sin won't be coming alone. In her way, she'll have a boost that she hasn't had before, but there'll be other threats snaking their way into the story starting with issue 1. From here, we'll be jumping throughout the Marvel Universe with a wild array of threats. The ghosts of the Super Apes, new Night Stalkers for a new world, the tragedy of victory, and the tears of the devil himself. I am loving that new design for Sin. I think that's a really interesting way to reintroduce her in like a much more violent aesthetic. To wrap up, what's the collaboration process been like with Corey Smith, Scott Eaton, Marcelo Ferreira, and Valentina Pinti? I imagine it's not too different from the work you've already been doing on the Spider-Man 2099 series. It's been invigorating. As you said, this isn't my first rodeo with multiple artists, but as a creator, I personally find it to be a joy. One of the best parts of this job is that a story begins with you as the writer can come back and surprise you. Having a different collaborator for each issue keeps the work even more energetic, surprising, organic, dynamic, and lighter on its feet. So I write the most exciting script I can. After all, my collaborators are my first audience. So if they're excited for the story, I've set them up to crush things, and then I get out of the way and watch the masters work. This is such a striking page here, evoking a both modern and retro sensibility for the Avengers. We have characters like Hawkeye, She-Hulk, and Hercules, who are such classic Avengers, but showcased here in modern outfits. We also get a really nice reunion here between Hercules and Wonder Man. And once again, just so beautiful to see all of our Avengers gathered across their mansion here, talking about their Avengers business, just like so many of the previous comics of old. Very excited to check out so much of Steve Orlando's incoming Avengers work. And I'm excited to see how it plays off of what Jed MacKay is doing with his main flagship Avengers run also. All right, really excellent stuff in store here over from Marvel Comics. little bit earlier over on our stream, we previewed the second issue of the adjectiveless X-Men series. Marvel Comics, in addition to that comic book, has also previewed some of the interior pages for their flagship Uncanny X-Men comic book. Let's go ahead and explore what Marvel has in store for Uncanny X-Men issue 2 with the brand new Outliers characters. This one also coming in over from Marvel.com. Get a special first look at Uncanny X-Men 2 featuring Rogue, Gambit, and Wolverine tussling with New Mutants like Calico, Deathdream, and Jitter. This one is written by Megan Demore. Krakoa has fallen, but mutant kind still needs the X-Men. In Uncanny X-Men 2 by Gail Simone, David Marquez, Rogue, Gambit, and Wolverine come face to face with the next generation of mutants. Becca, Constance, Simon Panette, aka Calico, Hatoro, aka Deathdream, Sophia Young, aka Jitter, and Valentin Correa, Ransom. As their first encounter gets off to an explosive start in the Louisiana swamps, Dr. Karina Ellis confronts one of her mutant prisoners at the X-Mansion turned prison. And there we go, we finally get a little bit more context behind what Dr. Ellis is ultimately planning to do with the X-Men's mansion. A special first look at Uncanny X-Men 2 pits Gambit against Calico, whose psychic connection to her horse Ember allows her to manifest new forms for her steed, and Jitter, who can channel any skill or power for a very brief period of time. Meanwhile, Wolverine faces Deathdream, whose death state allows him to summon souls and the power of the unliving. In one page, Dr. Ellis stalks the halls of the X-Mansion with Captain Ezra, her second in command, while she confronts her prison siren in another. Yeah, I think it's astonishing how much continuity at this stage Gail Simone and David Marquez have already created in the background of Uncanny X-Men. The idea of Dr. Ellis turning the X-Men's mansion into a prison and starting to go after these Outliers characters already after they've barely been introduced here is super compelling. I am loving how fast the plotting is moving in terms of these From the Ashes series. And believe it or not, that is the end of the text of this article, but we also have a ton of brand new preview pages. So give me just a moment and we will get Uncanny X-Men 2 here up on the screen. So here is David Marquez's cover on the second issue, not only teasing some of our already established X-Men characters, but the interesting new Outliers who were teased at the end of the first issue. And this is one of our interior pages introducing some of the Outliers. I am really fascinated by this character who has the psychic bond with the horse, already teased in that article. Plus, so much of the composition from David Marquez is just so striking. Here we have the character going up against Gambit with a really strong kick. I really compliment David Marquez on so much of his precision. I'm definitely seeing some exaggerated anatomy here, but I think the kinetic movement of some of the framing on the panel really helps me get immersed in the comic book and doesn't make that instance really detract from the reading experience. I definitely think the neck on this character is a little bit too exaggerated, but overall it does create this really interesting harrowing aesthetic on the page. We have Dr. Ellis here working alongside Captain Ezra and her assistant Philip, starting to turn the X-Men's mansion into their prison, and catching up with their prisoner that we read in that article who is called Siren. So hopefully our X-Men characters are going to be able to break Siren out. Marquez is so great at capturing just some of the dark vibes for some of our characters like Dr. Ellis to really just bring a sense of animosity to the page that is just unmatched. Okay, so this is Death Dream Hotoru. His mutant power is ghost summoning from his death state, and his first appearance was in Uncanny X-Men 1. Let's explore some of his background. In Kyoto, Japan, the baby Hotoru died during childbirth and was resuscitated. As a teen, he is able to choose a state of life or one of death at will. In his state as a walking corpse, he has a deep connection to the spirit world and can summon the souls and power of the unliving. Hotoru struggles to understand the living world and sometimes prefers the grave. You know, this character is actually reminding me of William Hand over from Blackest Night with his just love of death and his really interesting relationship to the afterlife, too. Cannot wait to see what Gail Simone is going to bring over to Hotoru Death Dream in the future of Uncanny X-Men. Here we have Calico, Becca Constance Simon Panetz. Yes, this is the character who has the psychic connection with Ember, her horse. Becca was raised as a perfect American princess by wealthy and overprotective parents who taught her to hate and fear mutants. She has a hard time accepting that she is one herself. She shares a powerful connection with her steed Ember, which she can transform into a variety of different horse forms at her command. This character is definitely reminding me of Mirage, Danny Moonstar. I'm interested maybe if some of her personality can differentiate herself from Danny as a character. And I'm pretty interested to see how Gail Simone is going to position her, as she's seemingly like a more altruistic character with less plot threads than somebody like Hotoru, who we just witnessed here. Here is Sophia Young Jitter, who has the mutant ability to hyper focus. Sophia can do anything she sets her mind to, accessing talents and skills most people train their lives to develop. The only downside for the Singaporean teen is the immediate crash if she exerts her ability for too long. Constantly on the move, she keeps a stopwatch on her at all times so she never has to slow down, not even to sleep. Loving the idea that Sophia is able to hyper focus and accomplish like so many tasks in such a small period of time. Also, the fact that she's from Singapore, I think, is also going to differentiate her from some of the other Outliers characters in terms of Uncanny X-Men. I'm hoping the future is bright for Jitter, and I can definitely see her really accessing a different position or scope within the rest of these other characters. Next up, we have Valentine Correa, known as Ransom, who has the ability of a black hole heart. The young Valentin was born in Buenos Aires with a black hole in place of his heart. Abandoned by his parents after he was kidnapped and held for ransom as a child, Valentin discovered that his captor's bullets only made him stronger and escaped. Since that time, he's made his own way on the mean streets of the world. You know, once again, we have a character who is going to be a lot different than these other Outliers heroes, mainly because of some of his own interactions here and the fact that he grew up over in Buenos Aires. So very excited to see what kind of new plot threads he's able to bring to both Uncanny X-Men and the rest of the Outliers characters. Looks like we've gone through most of these characters from Jitter over to Calico. And we've already had the opportunity to check out some of these amazing preview pages as well from David Marquez. All right, I think the future of Uncanny X-Men is looking bright, and hopefully these brand new mutants like Death Dream will help us get to some brand new scenarios and different stories for the X-Men characters. I'm going to take a super quick break. We will be back in just a moment here to talk about the Laura Kinney Wolverine series. We will be talking about one more D23 announcement and we might even squeeze in an interview over with Gail Simone. I'll be back in just a few moments here. Thank you so much for sticking with me. Okay, thank you so much for sticking with me here. Oop. In just a few moments, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the brand new Laura Kinney Wolverine series. This was actually announced over at San Diego Comic-Con. It was like one of the very final publishing announcements that Marvel Comics previewed, and I just didn't have enough time to squeeze it into our last stream. Without further ado here, let's go ahead and preview the brand new Wolverine Laura Kinney series coming in over from Marvel Comics. Let's see here. So here's the cover over to the first issue. The cover's coming in from Elena Casagrande. Casagrande is such an excellent artist. We previewed some of her work over on Blade recently. I'm happy to have her over on the XMen line. I think she's really talented. And alongside Erica Schultz and Giada Belviso, I feel like she is in great company here. Let's go ahead and preview the brand new Laura Kinney Wolverine series from San Diego Comic-Con beginning this December. Following the fall of Krakoa, mutants are hated, feared, mistrusted, and more manipulated than ever. Their only hope is Laura Kinney as Wolverine. Just announced by writer Erica Schultz at the Woman of Marvel panel at San Diego Comic-Con, Laura Kinney is going to headline an all-new solo ongoing series this December. This comic book is following Marvel exploring so many of their female X-Men in their own comic book series. We've already gotten the debut of the new Phoenix series featuring Jean Grey. I think that comic book written by Stephanie Phillips did an excellent job pitting Phoenix against all these super interesting intergalactic threats like Thanos' Black Order. Also, let's see, what else do we have? We have a Psylocke comic book coming in from Alyssa Wong, coming very soon from Marvel's publishing line. Thankfully, heroes like Betsy Braddock are still being published as a part of X-Force, even though it's not in her own solo ongoing series. Marvel Comics is really doing so well in terms of some of these other female X-Men characters. Following her work on last year's X-23 Deadly Regenesis, Schultz returns to the iconic character, this time teaming up with rising star Giada Belviso. Laura Kinney Wolverine begins as an exciting new era for Logan's daughter, who's already enjoyed success with solo runs like Tom Taylor's acclaimed all new Wolverine. I love that book. That was a really important piece of fiction establishing a lot of Laura Kinney's own personal continuity for Marvel. So the new series is going to see Wolverine enter the darkest corners of the Marvel Universe, places that neither the X-Men nor her friends in NYX would dare go. Her violent methods and unstoppable determination make her a one-mutant army, striking fear in those that take advantage of her kind. But as reputation grows, more and more mutants are in need of her. She may just find her as a target herself. We should also talk about the most recent issue of NYX, the debut of that comic book series, which featured Laura Kinney as a really prominent creator. So over in that tale, Laura had a violent interaction with Miss Marvel that actually caused a ton of animosity over in their relationship. I am super interested if Erica Schultz is going to be able to pick up on this dark iteration of Laura Kinney, who I have no doubt has been affected by so much of the tragedy that just broke out over on Krakoa. So very interested to see where Laura's current headspace is, and if she's still angry about some of the developments that happened in the most recent months of Marvel's X-Men continuity. Laura's going on missions so dire she has to go it alone. Wolverine takes the fight to those who stand as an assassin, of enemies of mutant kind. Laura Kinney was bred to be the ultimate assassin as X-23. She's long left that life behind, but as she encountered mutants forced to use their powers against their will, Wolverine takes it upon herself to right these wrongs, no matter who stands in her way. Join Wolverine as she embarks on missions abroad, ready to fight to her mutant oppressors wherever they hide. We want to show you all the different sides of Laura. There will be laughing and crying, teased Erica Schultz. So there we go. In addition to some of the dark underpinnings of NYX, it sounds like author Erica Schultz is also going to be exploring some of the lighter elements of Laura's personality. She says, Laura has dealt with a lot, and when she's met her other clones, she's asked herself, is this the person I'm supposed to be? Am I fated to be that person? Should I take my own path or end up like Logan? She decides to forge her own path, and this will be her own solo adventure. We already talked about how Laura Kinney Wolverine 1 is written by Erica Schultz, featuring artwork from Giada Belviso, and we have a cover here from Elena Casagrande. It looks like the first issue of this series is on sale December 11th. Once again here, so happy that Marvel is publishing so many of the female heroes of the X-Men within their own comic book series. And I think this Laura Kinney series is a really, really solid step in the right direction for the publishing. Okay, and next up, we're actually going to go ahead and explore, the future. Let's see here. We're actually going to go ahead and explore the future of what Gail Simone is bringing over to the Uncanny X-Men series. So really fantastic outlet here. The Popverse has actually interviewed author Gail Simone, who recently wrote the brand new Uncanny X-Men series. Let's go ahead and check out Grant D. Arment's piece over with Gail Simone, talking about the new Outliers, endlings, and Southern Gothic horror for Marvel's mutants. The second X-Men title of the From the Ashes reboot is out now, and Popverse sat down with its architect. So looks like this article does have some spoilers for Uncanny X-Men issue 1, so make sure to watch out there. Marvel's X-Men relaunch is in full swing. Last month saw the debut of Jed MacKay and Ryan Stegman's X-Men #1, and just this week, The House of Ideas released the second of three core titles in the From the Ashes relaunch. We have Uncanny X-Men 1 from comics legend Gail Simone and David Marquez. Uncanny X-Men brings together some of the most familiar mutants for a familiar and downright scary adventure. With the first issue out now, Popverse sat down to discuss the run with Gail Simone. Since the issue is already out, we're not holding back any spoilers for Uncanny X-Men. So Popverse's first question, they say, before we even get into the relaunch of Uncanny X-Men 1, you contributed to the free Comic Book Day special introducing fans to the From the Ashes relaunch. And one of the biggest things to come out of that was the mutant hand sign. Can you tell us just a little bit about how that came about, and will it be coming back in your run? Gail Simone says, it's the Midnight M, that's what we're calling it. And yes, I came up with it because it's like, they have a special symbol for domestic abuse. I felt like it was somewhat like that, and that you could just say that you were a mutant without saying it out loud, and help someone feel safe or know that they were safe with you, or that you could help them, or whatever the situation is, just to know they're part of the same family. That speaks to a very different place from what the mutants are in the Marvel Universe, as opposed to, say, a year ago. From your perspective, what is it like to be a mutant this moment in Marvel Comics? One of my favorite things about From the Ashes that I actually drew criticism towards it, towards the beginning of the relaunch, is the fact that it doesn't have a big high concept. The X-Men spent years over on their island paradise of Krakoa and were unable to stop all these invaders from really disrupting and taking their home from them. So the idea of the X-Men scattered across the globe as outlaws, to me, I think feels really novel in the scope of where the X-Men are currently. I think I've already said that I really do want the X-Men in the future to explore a massive status quo revelation that's really as big as Krakoa, but for the time being, having our X-Men operate under the radar, I think, is just a great way to push the line forward. After Krakoa falls, mutant kind is scattered all over the globe and possibly off the globe as well. So they don't have the connection to each other that they did. They're all grieving. Rogue is the one X-Man that believes in Xavier's dream, and when she calls to see if someone will help her, no one picks up the phone. There was even a super interesting reference in the first issue of Gail Simone's Uncanny X-Men towards Kitty Pryde denying the opportunity to join that roster of heroes. We've already talked ad nauseum about how Kitty is going to be a massive part of the upcoming Exceptional X-Men. Okay, so Simone says they're very scattered and kind of broken, and they've got their own agendas now. They're thrown back into the world and being subjective to humankind and what goes on in our world, more so than the beautiful homeland that they had with Krakoa. They really just do not have what they really just do not have that now, and they're struggling. They ask, is Rogue's idealism the reason you chose her as the narrator for this comic, and will that continue throughout the rest of the series? Okay, so yes, Simone says. The answer to that question is yes. At the very beginning of putting the books together, the one request that Tom Brevoort, who's the conductor of our X-Books, had was that Rogue be in this book. I felt like she was at the ground and at the heart, the one to ground this book with. So we're seeing things a lot from her perspective, and also that sets the tone of the book in that she's the one who believes in the dream. Whether she will continue it or not, we don't know yet, but as of now, she does. I love this paragraph. I really think it gives me so much context into the post-credits teaser at the end of the first issue of Uncanny X-Men. It looked like there was some heat between Rogue and Cyclops, and it looks like this one paragraph just does a really solid job introducing so much of the subtext and the fact that Rogue is still willing to move with Professor Xavier's dream, while Cyclops really wants to move the X-Men forward and probably away from what Xavier's ultimate vision is. On the subject of the characters, Uncanny X-Men is arguably the most classic version of the team in the From the Ashes titles. Was there a bit of nostalgia from the 1990s going into that decision? Did things like X-Men 97 contribute to that? I definitely have taken note about how Uncanny X-Men as a series feels like it's more inherent to the X-Men property with some of the characters that they have. And that's really, for me, one of the reasons why I've really latched on to what Jed McKay has been doing with the Adjectiveless X-Men series. I wish Gail Simone would introduce maybe a couple more mutants to make her cast of X-Men look a little bit more novel and modern. Gail says, I hadn't seen X-Men 97 at the time we put the team together, and I still have only seen the first two episodes. I think I'm in the same boat as Gail Simone. I have only seen the first two episodes of X-Men 97. I've talked about this a little bit on our stream before, but one of the major things holding me back from X-Men 97 is the fact that there is a brand new X-Men comic book published each and every week that is moving continuity forward instead of like referencing, what came before. So that being said, it's really hard for me to find the motivation to watch that show, but I'm so happy it exists and it's teaching like a new audience about some of the really interesting X-Men ideas. In fact, I was going to pull up this piece. I think we accidentally flashed it over on our screen a second ago, but X-Men 97 is starting to bring in some of the Grant Morrison era towards, it looks like their show in the future seasons. I think that's super, super exciting. I'm really hoping that that show will introduce like a brand new audience of X-Men fans towards characters like the Stepford Cuckoos, which have fueled so much of the publishing towards the past years. I'm loving the fact that people at least know who Mr. Sinister and Madeline Pryor are, is like a touchstone if they watch that show. I'm so excited about how much continuity that show is going to introduce, some of the X-Men comic books towards, people who've never seen that content in the first place. Gail says, we started with Rogue, and then naturally, I wanted Gambit to be part of it. And we wanted the tone of this book to be a Southern Gothic horror book, with some romance thrown in, some steam, if you will, with those two. I love hearing Gail Simone talk about Uncanny X-Men like it is a Southern horror piece. One thing about it is we haven't quite seen our team operate out of Louisiana yet. It felt like a lot of that first issue of Uncanny X-Men was really meant to establish our team and the location they'll be operating out of. So hopefully in the future we'll get some more horror-inspired ambiance for the future of Uncanny X-Men. I'm also curious to see which characters are going to be evoking some romance, aside from, of course, Gambit, I said Gambit and Rogue, or Rambit if you will. The goal in the beginning for me is to just roll out the welcoming mat from people who have either been long-term fans or if they're just dipping their toe in for the first time. That we have some recognizable characters they can grab onto in the beginning, then we introduce new villains and the Outliers show up at the end of issue 2. We're introducing them so you don't have to know anything ahead of time at all. You can be a long-time reader or a brand new reader. Okay, let's come back to the Outliers because I wanted to talk to you about that. But first, this issue is definitely flirty, like you said, but it's also very spooky. Gail Simone gives just a 3-word answer in response to that. She says, oh, just wait. I'm excited. Well, what is it in your opinion about the X-Men that goes with horror? I think the X-Men and the whole idea of the mutant world suits itself to any type of story, as long as you have some human quantities that resonate with the reader. You can do pretty much anything, in my opinion, if it's done well. But for Rogue and Gambit, Gambit takes sort of the outside that he felt safe in as a youth. That's outside New Orleans, at the edge of the woods there. I wanted that to be like, there's something really horrifying in those woods, we learn. And I wanted this to be the new, different, kind of unknown, scary setting for them that wasn't like the typical New York City, just to take them on a different type of adventure and to set a different type of tone. I actually had the pleasure of seeing Gail Simone talk about Uncanny X-Men at a comic book convention. Hearing her talk about the fact that she was going to set this book in Louisiana immediately gravitated me towards it. I feel like that's such an interesting place for the X-Men to operate out of. A lot of people still talk about that brief period where the X-Men were operating out of Australia. I loved it when the X-Men were in Krakoa. It was super interesting too when they were working outside of Limbo as well. The setting for the X-Men changes up so much of the tone for the current launch or line of books. I just can't wait to see what kind of, Lovecraftian Southern Gothic horror imagery Simone is going to evoke in the future of Uncanny X-Men. That's one thing I love about this relaunch of the Mutant books. Each book has its own tone in its own place, but yes, everybody is scattered at this time, and it gave the opportunity to do just that, and each one is doing it so well. It's so cool. How do you as a writer set the tone for horror in comics, and specifically, how do you and artist David Marquez work together to make this scary, make it Southern Gothic? That is a really good question from Popverse. One thing about David Marquez is his artwork is so modern. His characters look so youthful. How do you take that really bright and airy tone that David Marquez naturally lends to these books and shift it towards Southern Gothic horror? Let's see what Simone says. I always write full scripts, so David gets that. But there's always the caveat that whatever he thinks he can do better, he can just to go for it. Because I'm not an artist and I totally trust him. He's a freaking genius at this. Love the idea that Gail Simone has given Marquez a little bit more leeway to evoke the most interesting imagery that he can on the page. For instance, I was just proofreading this issue number 3 right before it's going to wrap, and I remembered it saying in the script that this page was maybe a stack of rows. And he did something completely different, and it's so effective, so cool, so emotional that I'm just blown away by it. He does this on every page practically, and that's one thing I love about him. Yes, he can draw the pretty pictures and all that, but he brings an emotional weight to this that not all artists can do. This particular book needs it because Tom Brevoort's directive to me, other than what that he wanted Rogue in it, was to break people's hearts. I was like, okay, that's cool, but can I also have them just kick ass? Can I have them be terrified? Can I also have a blast? So anyway, we're just doing that roller coaster, and David is amazing in it. And the new villain, or one of the new villains in this book, is just, I cannot believe what he did. I trust Gail Simone. I think Gail Simone's dialogue on the first issue of Uncanny X-Men was absolutely wonderful. The fact that she is excited about what she wrote, I think, really makes me excited for what she wrote too. Very interested to see what kind of horrors are lingering there in the Louisiana swamp. Tom Brevoort said, break people's hearts. And there's a scene in this first issue that rips your heart out. It's that scene with the 12-year-old telepathic cancer patient. Harvey X, Gail says. That scene was so effective. How do you, as a writer, still make death matter to these X-Men who've seen so much of it? Part of the Krakoa storyline was that the X-Men kind of conquered death, so how do you make these moments matter for them? I have to say here, when I think back about Harvey X, I think that plot point is probably a little bit too rushed. I think it would definitely help if it took place over the course of maybe 2 issues as opposed to 1. I feel like maybe there's some stronger instance of plot Harvey could have contributed towards the X-books overall. I do love that he referenced the endling that's prophesized all over that first issue of Uncanny X-Men. I think David Marquez did an excellent job drawing him, and I sure would like to see him come back and maybe even cheat death like so many of the X-Men characters did towards the Krakoan era. Let's see what Gail Simone has to say about it. As a writer, I'm like the master manipulator for the audience, and that's really my job. I wanted to take her even lower, and I felt like this is a way that it could be done. Plus, this is something that's important later in the story, and there are seeds being planted all over this first issue for what's coming. Harvey, he also believes in the X-Men, so that's a little bit of a bond that Rogue and him have immediately. Very happy to hear that Gil Simone has something in store for Harvey in the future of Uncanny X-Men as well. There is a line that just absolutely got me this issue. Gambit and Rogue, they're at the house you mentioned earlier, and Rogue's just talking about how dark things are looking, and Gambit says to her, maybe we aren't responsible for every weight ever loaded on the world. Maybe we lived for a time without fighting. Is that possible for these characters? Simone says, of course not. It's tragedy, right? Moving away from the heaviness a little bit in the beginning of the issue 1, Gambit, Wolverine, and Rogue fight this dragon Saturang. Will there be more of him? I love Saturang, the God Snake. I feel like he just injected so much personality into Uncanny X-Men 1. I love that he had the Eye of Agamotto too. Gale says, I created that dragon in an Iron Man issue that I wrote. And Saturang will learn if he appears again. Wherever he appears, he takes on the dragon form of that area. So that's why he looks like he does in the first issue, because they're in Mexico. They're also very important to the story. Nobody except me, what's good? I need to catch up on the new runs, but the story really needs to kick in. Feels like we are still trying to pick up a lot of post-Krakoa threads, but Uncanny finally sparks some interest now. Honestly, I'm glad to hear it. This is a really interesting conversation we're having about the nature of the X-Men books so far. I definitely feel the fact that in some of these titles, we're still waiting for like big plot points, big things to happen. But I'm really happy with how each of the books have some sort of tie to Krakoa and are starting to introduce some, bigger, larger threat. I feel like some of the villains and antagonists in the first issue of NYX were super, super interesting. Uncanny X-Men's, or excuse me, the adjectiveless X-Men series introduced that 3K group. That was a really interesting plot point towards the end of that one. Uncanny X-Men has brought these outlier characters. They've also introduced Dr. Ellis. I feel like right now these X books are all starting to take on really interesting plots. They're just starting to germinate right now and build towards that next storyline. I think some of what you're saying, nobody except me, I kind of wish there was a bigger concept uniting all of these books together. But I think in terms of plot, a lot of them are taking on the right, sense of direction and characters so far. I'm really attached to Dr. Ellis. And the fact that Dr. Ellis was introduced towards the end of X-Men 35 has me way more interested in her as an antagonist. And also for me makes this publishing line feel really cohesive too. I felt like we really naturally got to watch the transition between the end of Orcus and some of those other characters in the beginning of Dr. Ellis starting to approach the X-Men's mansion and turn it into a prison. The more I read about this, the more cohesive it's actually feeling to me overall. A super interesting conversation, though. Appreciate you coming over to our stream today. Okay. You've always said before you wanted to write Godzilla. Does Saturang scratch that itch a bit? There's only one Godzilla, come on. Okay, so that's a big no. Saturang and their heroes, they have their fight, and then he predicts something called the Endling. Without giving away any spoilers, what can you tell us about the Endling? How is it different from threats X-Men have faced before? An Endling in biology is the last existing member of a particular species. The Endling wants to be that. Nobody except me. Okay, I'm missing out. You have me intrigued. Still need to check out NYX. I think that book is going to make you so, so happy. You can trust me on that one. I think Era of Apocalypse was kind of a dud for me. I need to go back and finish Era of Apocalypse. I was really happy with a lot of the individual character interactions with that book. Also, I think they did a good job like nurturing characters like Gorgon, Penance, and also some of the other New Mutants characters. I'm really going to try and go back and finish that out, and then I'll see if I can give some impressions over on our stream next weekend. Moving away from that, in some of the interviews you've already given, you've mentioned there's an 18-issue story coming to Uncanny X-Men. Is Uncanny X-Men a story with a finite end that's already built in, or do you just mean that these 18 issues are going to be one arc? I don't want to give away too much, but there's several stories happening in that time period. Okay, I love this. I feel like this is exactly what we're talking about in some of the comments, and also really what we're concerned about regarding the entire line. I really want to know how far into the future, like Marvel's editorial, have all these X-Men books planned out, and I really want to see too how much they're going to be interacting with each other. The fact that Gail Simone teases that these 18 issues are going to be connected to each other in some, form or fashion, I think definitely introduces the concept to me that the X-Men are still going to be working with long-term storytelling. Even if it's not on Krakoa, the important part of the X-Men franchise right now is that they continue working with those plot threads. Like, for instance, I know the Mystique series over with Declan Shalvey. I know that Mystique series features a really angry Mystique in all these espionage scenarios, but I am really, really hoping that Mystique hasn't forgotten her family that she's been able to reunite with towards the end of the Krakoan era. So really, I'm just hoping that the future of Marvel's publishing line continues to be cohesive and takes on the threads from the Krakoan era, so we don't always feel like we're starting with zero with each and every comic book launch. All right, you mentioned the Outliers earlier. What are the Outliers? The Outliers are some young mutants that show up on the door of the Haven, and we don't know anything about them. No one's ever heard of them. We don't know if they're good or bad. Some of them might not even believe they're mutants at all. We've got our classic team, as you put it, and they throw everything into chaos. Rogue decided she's going to take Xavier's position and have a danger room out in the woods. That's pretty cool. Let's see. We're almost done with this interview. Any chance we could get the Outliers' names, or is that too much? We already talked about the Outliers. Very happy to see Gail Simone here talk a little bit about Jitter. She mentions the fact that Jitter is actually over from Singapore, and I think also should have a really interesting background as opposed to some of the other characters. I am loving the next question Popverse asks. In relation to Jitter, they ask Gail Simone if this could potentially bring the new Kitty Pryde towards the X-Men, who really served as the point of view character for the comic book line. Simone says, you kind of hope for that. You hope people will like them and be interested in them, and that's the thing, that's the first step. It's kind of a fun thing to think about. If you're at a convention and maybe somebody's cosplaying the character you created and those kinds of things. But the purpose of what we're doing is to fill in the holes that are there already. We don't have mutants with these kind of powers yet. They don't exist until now. So that's the first goal, and these new Outliers have more modern problems. The character of Ransom from Buenos Aires, I think, is so much different, just like Jitter's background being from Singapore. I think there is definitely something to what Gail Simone is saying in having characters that have different backgrounds that will hopefully make the X-Men feel more real and cohesive as a line. Last question for you. It's revealed the X-Men are fighting Saturang, that he has the Eye of Agamotto of Doctor Strange fame. Gambit swipes it just before the fight is over, and I was wondering, is he going to have it for the rest of your run? We have parentheses here with Gail Simone's response where she does not actually not respond. Popverse says, what did you say? And Gail says, I just didn't say anything. All right, so I think that is going to go ahead and not only wrap up this article, but our entire stream. I want to thank you guys so much for coming with me and previewing what's coming up next, not only for the X-Men's publishing line, but for Spider-Man as well. This upcoming Wednesday, we're going to have some upcoming reviews of a brand new comic books like Amazing Spider-Man and the adjectiveless X-Men series. Plus, it looks like we have an upcoming issue of Phoenix here just on the horizon. So much fantastic stuff in terms of Marvel's publishing line. Thank you so much for coming and check out our stream. We'll be back with new videos this Thursday and a brand new stream this upcoming Saturday. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon. Bye.